Today I'm chatting with David Gower from Emerita Resources. In this interview, we discuss macro, gold, we get into Emerita's recent drill results on the IBW project, and we also discuss the Aznalcollar court proceedings. From my view, Emerita is one of the most talked about names in the Canadian junior markets in recent memory. This is a name that has attracted tons of hate and also tons of love on social media, Twitter, CEO.ca, Stockhouse, you name it. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, hi, Steve. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Okay, so let's start with some macro talk, and then we'll get into Emerita in the second half. Big inflation print last week, Tuesday, clearly shocked the markets. The markets were expecting a number around 8.1%, came in at 8.3%. We got a Fed rate hike announcement this week. Lots of stuff going on right now in Europe and obviously with Russia and Ukraine. And then we got the China-Taiwan situation and Biden's 60-minute appearance. I don't know if you saw that on Sunday night. What's your take on everything that's going on?
Pandemic over.
Yeah. The White House sounded very happy with it. So yeah. What's your take on what's going on in the markets right now and ultimately the impact that it has on commodities?
Well, right now, I think the market is going to be choppy for a while. There's just so much uncertainty around inflation and what it means. Ultimately, inflation typically works in favor of commodity prices over time. And then the macro for commodities, particularly anything to do with the electrical transition, really hasn't changed. There's still a huge shortage, and there are legislated requirements in the biggest economies, essentially, that are going to demand that they be employed, for this energy transition and this fight against greenhouse gases. So I think we're in for a fairly volatile period over the next few months. Personally, and I'm not an economist, but obviously we do think about these things. I think interest rates, maybe there's one or two more hikes, but the market will start to recognize that things are stabilizing, and we should start to see maybe more order come back to the market. In the meantime, it's going to be very choppy.
Is it tempting, and I know that you're involved with a few publicly traded companies, is it tempting in a market like this to try to look at some of the more distressed assets and sort of lose focus because you see projects that you are so excited about that could be had on the cheap?
It depends on the company. Certainly for Emerita, we're not in that mode. But some other companies where you have assets where the results were, maybe not as good as you would hope, now is a great time to be looking at projects. There are distressed assets. There are even assets in private hands in places like Chile, for example. We've looked at a lot of projects through our summer, their winter, and the prices. The expectations on deals are much lower than they would have been this time last year. So it's actually for companies that think that they can access capital through the next year, say for copper projects, for example. I think it's a great time to be looking to pick up an asset like that. Emerita, particularly, we have our hands full. Let's face it. We're pushing. We've got 10 drills running on IBW. We've got probably 2 more coming, it looks like. So we're pushing hard to get that project through to an NI 43-101 as quickly as possible and make a decision on the development process. So
12 drills running on the property?
10 today, but probably
10
12
today, 2 more coming.
Well, probably 12 by next week. We haven't press released yet.
Wow.
But it's a big project.
Wow. Okay, so with Emerita, it's been a while since we spoke. So it sounds like you got lots of drills running on the IBW. Got to ask you about Aznalcollar. What's the latest on Aznalcollar?
Yeah, I'm not sure much has changed, Steve, since we spoke last. The courts, ruled. I think it was in March. The administrative court came out and said that they were going to wait for the ruling by the criminal court, which is the normal process for cases in Spain. But they also indicated that they were aligned with the ruling, with the findings of the criminal court to date, which is a very important comment in their disclosure or their resolution, because the criminal courts have already said that the other bid was illegal, and in fact, a number of the criminal charges stem from the fact that the panel allowed this bid to proceed knowingly that it was not did not meet the requirements of the tender. So it's a matter of time. We have the names of the 3 judges that will do the final stage of this, which is essentially sentencing, and we know which court it's going to be in. I frankly have given up trying to predict the dates. We're told it should have been by now normally. The courts are very backed up post-COVID, but that's where we are. We as soon as we have an indication of the court date, of course, we'll disclose that immediately.
Yeah, and of course, real business doesn't happen on a company's desired schedule, right? If every single time that I've seen a company that seemed to know what dates certain events were going to happen, they always end up looking like a pump and dump in the
end. We, as you're probably aware, there's a bit of a storm going on around us right now. But what I would say about that term, pump and dump, is there's been no dump. And, the stock ran up last year very strongly on enthusiasm and speculative enthusiasm that Aznalcollar would be resolved. But, I mean, really, who benefited from that? Nobody in management sold any stock into that market, and nor did we finance. So there's been no pump and dump. The market understands the value, I think, of Aznalcollar.
Yep.
We went through a pretty soft or softening of the commodity sector, I think, earlier in the year, along with the perceived delay in the court case. That's obviously taken a lot of that enthusiasm out of the stock. However, like many things, if you ask me, and I'm not your broker, don't go buy it on this word, but it's probably overdone.
Okay. So you guys put out some drill results on the IBW project. Can you give us some sort of color on the results and ultimately sort of what it means for shareholders?
Yeah. So the Romanera deposit is the focus. There's 3 deposits on IBW, but it's the largest. So there's a 34 million ton kind of open pit grade resource that was estimated by Rio Tinto in the 1980s. And within that, there's what they described as about 11.2 million tons of about 8% combined lead plus zinc with some copper and a gram of gold and maybe 60 grams of silver, something like that. We're looking to drill that off and expand it. The geophysics that we've done over the deposit shows a conductor over 1 kilometer. The drilling is only covering about 450 meters of that. Our drilling most recently extended it to depth, so it is continuing to depth. It's only drilled to about 350, 400 meters. And the other big surprise that we've had, which we think will expand the tonnage as well, is very high precious metals. A lot of the early drilling on this deposit, they didn't analyze for gold. And we do have, if you look at the assays, which I don't have in front of me, 14 meters of 7 grams gold, 9 meters, those sort of ranges, some really significant gold intercepts in areas that would be outside of that historical resource, which was based on a copper or a zinc plus lead cutoff. So, and the overall resource that Rio Tinto would have put together, and it's an internal report, so it wasn't a feasibility level study, but a lot of the early drilling that had no gold assays, they just used zero value. It just so we do feel the precious metals are well understated, and we're fine if the dollars come out of gold or copper or lead plus zinc. It all comes through the same mills.
What do you think's happening with gold right now? I mean, we're under $1,700. I didn't think we'd ever see these numbers again. Do you think that the gold thesis is dead? Do you think it's just the U.S. dollar's gotten so strong? And ultimately, what's it going to take for gold to start to get back to those previous highs?
What I read an analyst report just this morning on that, so it seemed to make sense to me what they're saying. Basically, while the interest rates are going up, they see a shift into interest-bearing accounts for the next little while. But ultimately, once that stops, they would say at that point you'll see gold really take a run. So maybe we're in for this till the end of the year, was the speculation. And then we should see gold recover, and but as funds can move into 4 or 5% interest rate type vehicles, I guess at this point, there seems to be a bit of a transition that way. That's one guy's opinion, not mine, but it's the best answer.
Well, I've heard that thesis from a few people I really respect, that when the Fed eventually does pivot, which there's certainly a school of thought out there, or a popular belief that at some point the Fed's going to say, okay, we've done enough damage to the economy, and they're going to make a U-turn, that the gold trade is going to be epic, because it's basically the U.S. government admitting that we are in full-blown MMT.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that we'd have inflation this high, and I didn't think that the Fed would be this aggressive. So what do I know?
Well, and inflation this high and gold going the direction it is, it's a new one in my experience as well.
Yeah. Okay, so how well financially positioned is Emerita right now to finish out this drill program? Is it fully funded? Do shareholders have to worry about any sort of money raises down at these levels?
No, we're fully funded. We've got still over 21 million in the treasury. This program, which what we've budgeted for, is 70,000 meters. Part of it will be results dependent. It might get bigger, it might get slightly smaller, but that will use less than half of that treasury. So we're well funded to do everything that we need to do on IBW. If and when AZN comes through, we're very good position to have a treasury that allows us to get started there as well. And we also have that Nueva Tintillo property, which is a very large project adjacent between Aznalcollar and the big Rio Tinto deposit. We've just completed that 25-kilometer belt airborne, and we're following that up now. So we will have money to do the initial drill program there as well on those targets, which hopefully will start later in the year. But
yeah,
it's
certainly a good spot to be in these financial markets.
It's very cost-effective jurisdiction to work. I can tell you that. We're looking at our costs in IBW of around 100 euros a meter versus, say, Chile, 250 US. Brazil, all in, you're probably looking 180 US, something like that. So it is. We can get a lot of mileage out of our treasury there, and the euro is almost at par with the US dollars right now, which is also helping.
So, David, thanks so much for hopping on here. This continues to be one of the hottest stories in the junior markets. I'm looking forward to the conclusion of the Aznalcollar court proceedings. Fingers crossed here that we're going to get the news by the end of the year that shareholders are looking forward to. And hopefully you'll come back on and continue to break down the story as we get more drill results and more events happening.
Great. I'd love to. Thanks, Steve.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell, and let us know what you think in the comment section. All right. Thank you, everybody.